Tony Hody Training and Consulting presents the Crash Course Podcast. Sponsored by Engage, Builder Prime, and Hiring Strategies. Your weekly destination for coaching, inspiration, and new skills to help you maximize your income and success in the home improvement sales industry. Here are your hosts, sales and training experts, Phil Wiley and TJ Parsons.
Hello and welcome to Ep.5 of the Crash Course Podcast. My name is TJ Parsons. I'm joined once again by Phil Wiley. Phil, how are you today?
I'm great, TJ. Ep.5 already, huh?
It's flying by, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How's your week going?
It's going well. You know, football's back, so we're getting back in the groove of that, and the Olympics are a lot of fun. We're kind of wrapping that up, but USA's killing it, so it's been an entertaining week.
Yes, sir. So let's start out by giving a shout out to our supporters, our sponsors this week.
A big shout out, big thank you to Engage, Builder Prime, and Hiring Strategies for once again sponsoring the podcast.
I want to mention Hiring Strategies real quick. They came on board as one of our sponsors, and we really haven't talked about them that much, but they do a lot of personality assessments and leadership assessments, and I had the opportunity to work with Kim a couple times this week. A couple companies have reached out to us and asked for us to help them find some and fill some leadership roles in their company. And I got the opportunity to work with Kim, and her assessments are outstanding. Not only do they tell you just about everything you need to know about your candidate, but the main thing I love is it gives you a ton of interview questions so that the next time you sit down with this person, things to ask them, things to find out about their past experience of how they dealt with certain things. And you know, I'd love to set up a time if there's anybody that's looking for any type of an assessment for their hiring or promoting leadership to hook you guys up and give you guys a chance to meet. But definitely appreciate Kim and her company, and also, you know, Engage and Builders Prime. They've been with us since the beginning, and we appreciate them as well.
Absolutely. And we'll kick things off this week with a question from last week. So this question comes from Chris. He says, what's your opinion on pitching a one leg? My company recently started running one legs for the first time, and we've had pretty negative results. I'm curious to hear your opinion. So Phil, I'll let you start that one off.
Well, first of all, my opinion is that as salespeople, we need to go with the flow. And if the direction is we're going to give presentations to one legs, that's what we got to do. However, if an owner of a company or a sales director reached out to me and said, what's your thoughts on pitching a one leg? I would say, try to avoid it at all costs. If you have to do it to avoid a complaint or an upset customer, then figure out a way to work with that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're out there and you're married and you came home and your spouse or significant other made a $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 decision without talking to you, how would you feel about it? It's funny that that question happened this week because of what we're covering today. But typically, if I've seen in the past when you do sell to a one leg, it ends up becoming a cancellation because the homeowner is not there for price conditioning, not there to see the value of the company or the product, not there to see the differences between you and your competition. And the first words out of their mouth is, you just agreed to that for that? No way. So great question.
Yeah, in my opinion, pitching a one leg is essentially giving the customer a quote through email, right? Because you kind of hit the nail on the head that you can sit there and do a 2.5, 3 hour presentation with the person that is there. But what happens when the second party arrives home? They say, how was your day? Oh, it was great. We had the window guys here. Oh, great. How'd that go? It was good. What kind of price did they leave? With no context, no information, just what was the price? And they go,
right.
oh yeah, it was about $56,000. And of course, what's that person's reaction? $56,000.
That's crazy.
That's insane. We're not spending that on windows.
Right.
And even if the other spouse was thinking like, you know what, based off the information they showed me, 56,000 is actually pretty reasonable because we've got, 42 windows in the house. The other person is still not on board. And of course, now their negative reaction is affecting the way that the initial person felt about the presentation. So it's a lose-lose scenario. We've all been in that situation where we've had to pitch one legs, and most of us have sold a one leg. I know I have. We've all done it before. And sometimes they do stick, but I think ultimately, if you look at the numbers, a majority of one legs that are sold, I think, end up canceling. I would bet very large amounts of money that if you looked at the numbers and saw the cancellation rate on one legs are a lot higher. So like Phil said, if the company's direction is to pitch them, we got to pitch them, right? But
right.
If you're asking our opinion, if we were starting a company ourselves and creating our own processes, I know I personally, and knowing what I know about Phil, I don't think we would ever pitch a one leg. We'd want to reschedule it as many times as, if every single time, if we had the option to.
So if it's not your company policy that you have to pitch a one leg, obviously we would think what makes the most sense is to try to reschedule that appointment for as soon as possible, where all decision makers are going to be there. And explain to the homeowner, look, we're going to ask you to pick out colors and styles and options, and we want to get everybody's input because this is a big decision. But what do we do, Tim, if we're feeling some resistance or we're afraid that this customer is going to get upset and possibly complain to the lead source? Let's say maybe it's a store lead or a show lead, or maybe they're going to go online and give us a bad review. What do we do in that case?
Well, maybe we'll start that conversation with, wouldn't you agree that if they are reacting that way, it's probably because you didn't handle it correctly with your language?
100%.
Yeah.
And you can't win. I mean, we've both been in, tons of homes. You can't win. I mean, if it's the wife only, she feels like we're being chauvinistic and that we don't think she can make a decision. And if it's the husband that's there, then he thinks, oh, you want my wife here because you think that, she's the boss and she's going to say yes. You're not going to win. So,
well, yeah. And I think a huge portion of that is, again, in your language. If you just say directly to the one leg, like, well, yeah, the reason that we do this is I know I wouldn't make a $50,000 decision without talking to my wife. Like that's not going to be the most effective language, and you're going to get a negative reaction. I spin it to where I put the blame back on myself or on our company. Like,
right.
Now we've ran into issues in the past where we've designed full bathroom projects with one person and they love it and they order it and everything's fine. Then the day of install comes, we bring everything to the house, we start gutting the original bathroom, and then the second person finally sees what the original person picked, and they go full-blown panic and say, I'm not putting that in the house. That's hideous. That's not at all what she told me this was going to look like.
Right.
And so now you're out of a bathroom. We've already tore your bathroom up. We've lost a whole bunch of money on materials, and it's a lose-lose situation. So we want to be sure we have everybody on board with everything that's being selected before we move forward.
And the last thing I'll say about this is something else that we've heard salespeople say, which is definitely a no-no, is it's against our company policy to pitch one legs.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to pitch one legs. The Better Business Bureau says that you shouldn't pitch a one leg. Don't say that stuff to the homeowner. You're just going to make them mad, and it's not going to turn out very well.
One of the biggest turnoffs in all of sales is inside baseball talk. Yeah. When you start using words like one leg, that person has no idea what you mean. Please don't ever use inside terminology like that.
You mean like the shift?
Yeah.
The shift is on.
Yeah, that's bad stuff. But yeah, thank you, Chris, for the question. We really appreciate that. And just a quick reminder for anyone that would like to ask a question, you can leave a comment on any of these episodes, or you can send an email to phil@tonyhody.com, and we will answer your question on next week's episode. So thank you, Chris, again for the question. But we will move on to today's major topic, which is protecting your income, also known as buttoning up the sale. So Phil, I'll let you kick that off.
Yep. Tim and I have always thought that the button-up process is the most important step in the selling process. You spent all of this time giving a world-class presentation. You've gotten all your tie downs, your trial closes, you've uncovered all the customers' problems, you've solved them, you've agreed on a price, you've agreed on a payment, you've agreed to get the project started, and the customer's excited, they're ready to move forward. And now the most important piece is to protect that sale and make sure you button it up properly. All salespeople know when they're sitting at that kitchen table that they have a pretty good idea, TJ, about how much money they're earning on that sale. And what I want you to do as salespeople going forward when you do your button ups is I want you to imagine that money is sitting on the kitchen table before you leave. And you get to come back and pick it up in 3 days. So before you leave, what do I as a salesperson need to do or talk about with the homeowner to make sure that when I come back in 3 days, that money's still there? And that's to me anyway, that's the key to the button up. It may not be exactly the same every single time. It's based on who you're sitting with and things that they've said to you. But you want to make sure that you cover whatever you think is necessary with the homeowner before you leave. And real quick, TJ, before I send it back over to you, one thing I want to say up front before we get too far into this is your company may already have in their sales methodology how to handle button up. And if they do, we're definitely not sitting here today saying, change the way you do this. You want to make sure that if you hear something today that you think is a great idea to incorporate into your methodology, that you talk to your sales manager, have them watch the podcast, share it with them, and make sure that it makes sense with your methodology. If you don't really have a methodology on buttoning up sales, or it's not a trained step in your company, then yeah, we're going to share with you today how we've taught sales reps how to button up sales. And we've had sales reps write multi-millions of dollars worth of home improvements over the years with very high net rates. And it's because we button it up properly.
For sure. And I think it's just so important to remember that your sale, every sale, is very fragile. And any whiff of misinformation or discomfort at the end can cost you the deal. And I don't want to add any additional pressure to people. I know sales reps already feel a ton of pressure every house they walk into, but you could crush your entire appointment and do a phenomenal job from start to finish. But if you say the wrong thing at the end, which wrong thing at the wrong time, right? Everything can fall apart. So we're going to discuss some language and some tools that we like to use that we know will solidify things in more of a positive direction before you leave the house.
Yeah, but also when it comes to buttoning up a sale, you remember when you were a kid, TJ, and your mom or dad would always tell you, don't touch the stove, it's hot.
Oh, yeah.
And you would be like, okay. And then you kept hearing it over and over. And then you're like, I wonder what it feels like to touch the stove. And, we all had to touch the stove once before we learned not to do that. Well, talking about button up, you got to be really careful when you talk about button up. You could talk about it too much.
Yes.
Where the homeowner is like, wow, they spent a lot of time talking about cancellations. They must get a lot of cancellations. I wonder why. And you can also not talk about it enough and try to avoid it altogether. And that also leads to the homeowner basically being left to their own devices on whether they're going to cancel the deal or not.
I've always felt that company story and button up are very much like ice cream. if you give somebody a pint of ice cream, they'll eat the whole thing and they'll love it, right? But if you make someone eat 20 gallons of ice cream in one sitting, they're going to hate ice cream and never want to eat it ever again. And the button-up process is exactly like that. You can't overdo it.
Yeah, the owner of our old company used to say it was the seventh milkshake, right?
Mm-hmm.
He'd say, "Phil, you like a milkshake?" I'd be like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, how about seven?" No, no thanks. By
Yeah,
about the second or third milkshake, I'm not going to be feeling too well.
for sure.
Uh, Next thing is you know, you spend one thing about a sales presentation, and Tim, obviously you were great in the house at what you did. But when you gave your presentation, you got people emotional, you got people excited, you
Yes.
got people to, you know, I've heard in the past we kind of put them under the ether a little bit, right? We put them under the anesthesia. Um, it's very important now that you take the time to bring them out of that, to be in the recovery room holding their hand when that ether rubs off or that anesthesia wears off, and make sure that the customer understands what they just did, when the work's going to be installed, how they're going to pay for it, and make sure they're comfortable with everything before we take off.
Yeah, getting the yes is an emotional decision, but keeping the yes is all based on logic.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a reversal in how you're focusing on your psychology.
Yep. What do they say? They buy on emotion and justify it on value, right?
Right.
I
It's
mean,
a kind of a left brain, right brain
yeah,
situation.
yeah. So, talking about cancellations, TJ, why do homeowners cancel their contracts? I mean, don't you hate it? You go out and you write a deal, and the customer gives you a hug before you leave, and you think it's the most solid deal in the world, and next day you get a cancellation. What makes customers cancel?
Well, in my opinion, I think the number one cause of that is lack of information. You see it all the time where a sales rep can do a really good job of getting that person emotional and making them feel the value of what's happening. But when you leave and they start trying to justify it again with logic, they don't have enough information. They don't have enough statistics to back up that decision in their mind. And so if they don't have a clear understanding of what they purchased and more importantly, why they purchased, then everything can fall apart. So I would say that 70 to 80% of cancellations are based on we didn't give the customer enough information during the pitch.
So what you're saying is we need to take accountability for cancellations.
100%.
We need
Absolutely.
to make sure that we're always looking at ourselves saying, why did that customer cancel?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think another reason is the scientific term is cognitive dissonance. The sales rep term is buyer's remorse. And one thing that we need to remember is that it is a natural feeling that everybody goes through when they spend money, right? TJ, you take your wife and your kid out for a nice dinner. You go to a real nice restaurant. Maybe you buy a nice steak, a nice dinner, bottle of wine, a nice dessert. Next thing you know, you spent over $200, $300 for a nice evening out. You wake up the next morning. Oh my gosh, why did we spend so much money on dinner last night? Even though you had a great time, maybe you were celebrating something important and you could afford it, you still go through that, man, we really didn't need to spend that much on dinner. It's a natural feeling. And when people buy a home improvement, maybe they don't sleep. They stay up all night and they wake up in the morning if they do get some sleep and they feel sick at their stomach. And it's a natural feeling. We're spending money and it makes us a little uncomfortable,
Well, and
right?
we've talked about this before on other episodes that oftentimes this is the second or third or fourth largest purchase that this person will ever make in their entire life.
Right.
And that's a lot of weight. It's a lot to think about. And there are a lot of people that they have this internal defense mechanism where they think, I shouldn't make split decisions. I think a lot of people have that built into their brain where they think split decisions are bad. And the longer I take to think and process a decision, the more accurate and the better the outcome will be. So when you get someone to move on a 30, 40, $50,000 purchase after an hour and a half or 2 hours of knowing them, everything inside of them is telling them that they did something wrong. So your job is to convince them that there was no way they made the wrong decision, that you checked every box, you answered every question so that those fears subside. And if they don't have any fears, if they feel comfort and confidence that, man, I cannot get a better deal. This was great. This is going to be wonderful for my home. Then your deal is going to go net and your income is protected.
Awesome. And you kind of touched on this when you talked about, the lack of information. Sometimes they're still not clear of what they purchased. They're still a little confused. Maybe they still don't know what color they want or what style they want, or
especially in a design heavy product like bathrooms or kitchens, when you're looking at so many different options. Or if there's we work with a couple companies that have many different product levels. They've got their entry level, their premium, they've got 5 or 6 different types of product. If you're showing a lot of those, that can lead to extra confusion at the end too. So it's got to be really clear exactly which one they picked and which one they're getting.
Yeah, you want to make sure the customer clearly understands what they're buying. Affordability, TJ, is a big reason why people cancel. One thing that I promise you, if you had a hidden camera that you left in the house when you left, before you ever get to your car with your samples, one homeowner is going to turn and look at the other homeowner, and they're going to ask what question, TJ?
They're probably going to ask, are you sure we can afford this?
Yes, every single time. So affordability is a big reason people cancel, and we'll talk about how to avoid that in a minute. We got on our list third-party influence. What are we talking about there, TJ?
Third-party influence is the natural thing that happens, right? You make a big decision like this, and you did such a good job of getting the homeowner excited and emotionally invested. So they pick up the phone and they call their sister, their best friend, their mom, whoever it might be, and they say, hey, guess what? We just talked to this bathroom guy. We're getting our bathroom modeled. I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. And what's the first question that person asks, right? Which is,
how much did you pay?
Exactly, right? And they go, oh, we got a great deal. We got a bunch of discounts. It was only $25,000 for the whole bathroom. And 9 times out of 10, what is the person on the other end of the phone? What's their response?
You spent how much?
Yeah. And then it's usually followed up by, Brian and Kathy down the street just got theirs done, and it's gorgeous. It's pure granite, and there's gold accents everywhere. They only spent $2,000.
Right.
You got ripped off.
Or there's that guy at work that everybody's worked with before that no matter what you buy, no matter how much you spent for it, you pay too much, and he knows somebody that could have done it for a lot less. So third-party influence is a big reason why people cancel.
Absolutely.
How about, do people ever get other estimates after you leave?
Yes, especially on competitive lead sources, whether that be an Angie's List or Home Advisor type or a show and event lead. That happens quite a bit where they already had appointments scheduled before you arrived.
Yeah, and our competition always does the right moral thing, right? They walk into the house and the homeowner says, yeah, I already hired Rhino Remodeling to do my kitchen. And they're like, oh, well, that's a great company, great product. I don't want to waste your time. I'm out of here, right?
Oh, yeah, that happens maybe 5% of the time if you're lucky.
Right. Yeah, they're going to badmouth you. They're going to say that you're expensive. They're going to try to find anything and everything negative to say about you. And they're going to have a better product than you and a better price than you. And they're going to help the customer cancel your deal. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't wait to talk about how we combat that one, because that one's pretty easy.
Yeah. So sometimes you have strong salespeople. And sometimes, we're still training them and trying to polish them off the right way, but sometimes they just come across the wrong way, and they won't take no for an answer, and the customer starts to feel pressured. And sometimes, TJ, people will buy just to get the salesperson out of their house,
Oh, yes.
right?
Just
And
because
we've
they
seen
feel
it happen,
so
right?
uncomfortable. Yep. They feel
And
so uncomfortable, and they feel like if they don't say yes, things are about to get more uncomfortable because they
right,
feel like the attitude and the uh, just the way that this person carries himself, that he's about to make them feel guilty or kind of accuse them of being stupid for making that decision, and they don't want to deal with that, so they just say yes.
yeah. What are other reasons why homeowners cancel, TJ?
I think a big one that I've seen a lot is really poorly performed paperwork.
Oh,
That's a big one where the paperwork is like chicken scratch and you can't really read it, and you need a magnifying glass to get in there and figure out what box was checked. What is this? I can't even figure out what we're getting here. Or if there's missing spots, people forget, sometimes they just don't fill it out completely, or they don't do a good job. This is probably the bigger issue. They don't do a good enough job explaining the entire contract. So like, if a lot of us have contracts where, especially on like a design heavy product like a bathroom or a kitchen, where you might only use 4 or 5 sections of the 15 sections that are in that contract because it's just things that they're not buying. Taking a minute to explain those sections before you move on to make them understand, hey, we're not going to be buying those. It's really important. So, paperwork can really make someone feel uncomfortable if it's not done well.
yeah. If you're still on paper, I know a lot of people haven't went digital yet, but if you're still on paper, you got to take your time, because you got to think about the psychological thing that takes place. And the homeowner's like, if the paperwork's messy, if it's this sloppy, if there's things missing, what's my install going to be like? It just, from a psychological standpoint, it sets a bad precedent right up front, to where the homeowner feels like, man, the whole relationship with this company is going to be messy.
Absolutely. And then the last one is what we started the entire podcast off with. The big question we got from Chris is the homeowners not being on the same page.
Right.
Whether that's one homeowner wasn't present, or you have maybe the husband wants one color and the wife wants another, or someone wants to do a shower but the other one wants a bathtub. It's making sure that everyone's 100% on the same page before you leave the house. We see that far too often, where the customer calls the next day and just says, I thought we were on the same page, but it turns out John, he just really wants a bathtub. So I think we're going to need some time to think about this, because I want the shower, he wants the tub, and I don't know, we're going to have to talk it over.
Right. That's awesome. And then I want to add one to the list that, um, I joke around a lot of times, and I talk about, things that sales reps do that drive me crazy. Well, one that I can't stand, that every time it happens, I just want to punch someone in the face, is when you sell on rescission.
Oh,
And what I
yes.
mean by that is the customer's right there. You can tell that they're going to go one way or the other. And you look at the homeowner and you say, tell you what, you got 3 days to cancel your order. So why don't we go ahead, get everything started. I don't want you to lose the discount. We'll get everything started. We'll fill out the paperwork. Take your 3 days to think about it. And if you decide you want to cancel, cancel. If not, everything will be turned in and we'll get the project started. Don't be a weak salesperson and sell on rescission. If you can't sell clean deals that don't cancel, don't sell it. You should be proud of the fact that you don't get cancellations. You should take it as a negative against you anytime a customer cancels, because that means we either pressured them and pushed them too hard into doing something, or we did something we shouldn't have done. So make sure that you don't ever, ever, ever sell on rescission.
Could not agree more. So let's go through each of those reasons individually and talk about ways that we can avoid each one of them. We'll start from the top with cognitive dissonance. How do
Also
we take
known as
buyer's remorse?
buyer's remorse. One of my favorite things you used to do, TJ, and I incorporated it into all of my training was, I grabbed a piece of paper and I asked the homeowner, give me 5 reasons why you went ahead and decided to purchase these windows today or this bathroom today. And I didn't help them. You didn't help them. It has to be their 5 reasons. And I wrote them down. You wrote them down. And then we took a magnet on the refrigerator and we put the list up on the refrigerator and we said, hey, tomorrow morning when you wake up, if you're feeling a little uneasy or uncertain with the decision that you've made, when you go to the kitchen to get your coffee or your orange juice or get breakfast started, pull this list off the refrigerator and remind yourself why you made the decision in the first place and why it was a great decision.
Absolutely.
There's other ways that we can combat buyer's remorse.
Another way that we can tackle buyer's remorse is through a third-party call of your own, which that's either calling the customer the next day to check in, or what my favorite thing to do was use a welcome call. So this is something that we would do before we leave the house. Every time we sold is we'd say, hey, before I leave, I'm going to give my manager a quick call. He just wants to introduce himself to you and kind of welcome you into the family. So, I would call Phil or one of my other managers at the time, and I would just run through the project and say, hey, I'm with John and Mary Jones. Just got them all taken care of for a new bathroom. They're getting X, Y, Z. It's beautiful. They love it. Can't wait to get it started. And then maybe you can go through some of the language you would use on the other end of the phone.
Yeah, first of all, I always, thank them for trusting us with their business. I always ask them, how did TJ do today? I always reassured them that TJ was one of my top salespeople, my top designers. They're in great hands. I always told them, TJ will make sure that everything's done exactly the way the customer expects it to be done. I always ask TJ to put my phone number down for the homeowner. I tell them, that I keep TJ busy, and if you ever have a question, feel free to call me. I always ask the homeowner, are you guys paying cash for this project or are you financing it? What payment did you guys agree on? Are you comfortable with that payment? You are emotional as well. We talked about the homeowner getting emotional. As a sales rep, you're emotional. And it's good to bring that third person into the mix because they're going to see things and hear things that you're not going to hear. And you pick up on things that the homeowner says, maybe their hesitation, or they start saying things like, I think so, or maybe. And you could tell they're a little uneasy. They're not comfortable. So I always made sure the sales rep knew, hey, after I welcome the homeowner to our family, you need to get back on the phone. Because if I do hear something, I'm going to tell you, hey, TJ, I think they're uncomfortable with the payment, or I still think they're uncertain on whether they're making a good decision. Or I may just say, hey, great job, drive carefully on the way home. But if I hear something or, I'll let you know because, when's the best time to solve a problem? Right now.
Yep. But
right?
Before it becomes a bigger problem.
Right.
And it's a lot easier to fix the problem and have the discussion right there in the house rather than 2 days later after they've kind of already made the decision, like, yeah, we're not going to do this anymore.
Right. And I want to go back to the one you said before you start talking about welcome calls, because this is another one that drove me nuts, is calling the next day.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard sales managers tell sales reps, don't call the customer until the 3 days is up.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to mess with them. We don't want to disturb them. I promise you, there's not homeowners sitting at home and the husband comes home from work and he looks at the wife and goes, did TJ call? No. Oh, how are we going to cancel this? We need TJ to call so we can cancel. If they're going to cancel, they're going to cancel. And I can't tell you how many times when I was a sales rep where I promised the homeowner, I'm going to call you tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'm going to have a 10 o'clock appointment. I'm going to call you on the way to my appointment. If you have any questions, write them down so you don't forget. And when I call you back, have your questions ready for me. And I called them and they had a couple questions, and I could tell by their questions, if I had not called them back, they would have canceled.
Yep.
I can't tell you how it's much easier to solve the problem before they send in their cancellation notice than it is after they send in their cancellation notice.
For
So
sure.
number one, always call the customer the next day. And number two, if you tell them you're going to call them, you better call them.
Oh yeah.
Because there's nothing
That's the
worse
quickest
than
way to get a
telling them.
cancellation.
Yes. Nothing worse than saying I'm going to do something and then not doing it.
Yeah. Last comment about the welcome call is, guys, this is next level stuff. Like, we've worked with a number of companies that have never even thought of using that as a tool. But I can't tell you how powerful that is to have another voice of importance, of voice from management on the other end of the phone to confirm all the things you talk to with the homeowner. No one else is doing it, but it can make a huge, huge difference in what you do. And to piggyback on top of that, something else I love to do during the welcome call before you go, if your company parameters allow for it, is scheduling the measure before you leave the house.
Oh,
I think that's so impactful. We've worked for companies that have done it tons of different ways, but I know a lot of places, what you'll do is you'll sell the job, and then 2-3 days later, typically after the cancellation period, the office finally calls back and says, hey, I know you signed a contract with Phil 3 days ago for a new bathroom. We'd like to get that scheduled. And getting a hold of that person sometimes can be a little bit more difficult. Yeah, because you're just calling and hoping that they can answer the phone. We have had a lot of success just scheduling the measure before you leave, typically on that welcome call. So, and then that's another reason for the sales rep to justify making the call, not just to say, hey, my manager wants to say hi to you, but hey, my manager wants to introduce himself to you, and we're going to schedule your measure. And now you have justification for making that call in the first place. But I know, this is not something that a sales rep can just implement. This has to be sales management that has to agree to something like this. But man, it's really effective to have that next event on the calendar already planned and agreed to before you walk out the door.
awesome. Awesome. Now, you mentioned earlier about third-party calls or third-party
Influence.
And my question for you is, you mentioned earlier that, sometimes they call somebody right away, or they go up to somebody at work the next day and say, hey, guess what happened last night? How can we handle that before we leave?
Well, you always taught me to have that conversation before I walked out the house, which was, hey, this is so exciting. Who's the first person you're going to tell? And
it's Bob, probably at work. I have breakfast with him every morning.
okay. Well, what's the first question he's probably going to ask you?
Of course, Bob always wants to know how much money we spent.
Right. And something that you have to remember is, before I came to your house tonight, when we were talking about bathrooms, you probably thought the whole bathroom, you mentioned earlier, you probably thought the whole bathroom would be about 10 grand, but after everything that we went through, 10 grand's not realistic.
Right.
But you got to remember that Bob, he doesn't know that yet.
Right.
So most people that haven't gone through this process are just going to say the same thing. And that's totally understandable, but just, don't get a little nervous when he says, oh, that's crazy. I thought I can get it done for 10 grand. Everybody feels that way because they just haven't gotten the right information yet.
Yeah. I'll just tell Bob that he wasn't here and he doesn't know anything about your company or the product we're getting. And I will ignore Bob when he tells me I spent too much. He think every day when he buys breakfast, he complains about how much breakfast costs. So everything's too much money to Bob.
And if he thinks a couple Pop-Tarts are expensive, wait till he sees the cost of a bathroom, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now here's a controversial one, because homeowner or sales reps are afraid of this, and we've got to get past this. And that's, taking the sale away. Last thing I want to do after a customer has said yes and filled the paperwork out, or if it's digital, they've given all their digital autographs and initials, is to say, hey, we can rip this up or we could delete all this. But you know, one of the things that I always like to ask the homeowner is, John and Mary, before I go, are you completely comfortable with the decisions you've made today? Because if you're not, I don't want to get a cancellation. I don't get cancellations. It's a direct reflection upon me. It gives people in my office a negative feeling about how I sell. So if you're not completely satisfied, tell me now. I'll rip this contract up. I'll delete this contract off my iPad, and we can just agree to be friends, and I'll move on with my life and you with yours.
Yeah, I would always like to kind of start the conversation with, look, as I'm explaining the 3-day RTC,
Yeah,
that this form was built to protect you from fraudulent businesses. A lot of people misunderstand it, and it's like, oh, I have 3 days to think about it. And that's not what it's built for.
right,
It's built to keep you from being ripped off, right? So when people use it that way, of like, oh, I thought about it for 2 days and I just changed my mind, it doesn't change what the intent of the form is. And it goes back to the company, and it tells the company that you thought I was doing something wrong.
right.
And of course, that's never my intent. So before we finish this, and I know we just filled all this paperwork out, we spent a lot of time together, but look, if you have any hesitation whatsoever, if you don't think the payment's affordable, if you're not happy with the product, if you're not happy with me, whatever the situation is, I would much rather tear all of this up, or delete all of it right now and shake hands and part ways as friends, rather than get an angry phone call in 2 days from the office when they find out a cancellation came in. So
Yeah.
as long as you're completely comfortable, then we can finish this up and move forward. But if you're not, please tell me now, because I do not get cancellations. I can't get cancellations. I'm trying to protect my job.
Yeah, and if you're uncomfortable with this, or you're like, man, I don't know. I don't know if I really want to lose a deal that I worked so hard to get. Here's a promise that I give you. Um, every single deal that I ever ripped up, I rewrote before I left the homeowner's house. Because number one, they were shocked that I was willing to give up their sale for my own reputation. And number two, I found out why they were still uncomfortable, and we solved the problem, and they decided to go ahead and stick with it and move forward.
Yep.
You mentioned sloppy paperwork earlier. You know, that's one part of the button up that's important, is go back over your paperwork again yourself, review it, and make sure that you didn't miss anything, that there's not something on there that's hard to read, that there's not a bad date or a missing signature or initial. But a big part of avoiding the customer seeing those problems after we leave is to double check everything before you take off. Another big thing that I like to talk about, TJ, is making sure that we tell the customer, you and I both know you could get this job done for less money,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
You know, we call that the cost versus value. You know, this project costs less money if you decide to go with less quality, or a company maybe that doesn't necessarily have your best interests at heart. But let's remind us of the value of what you purchased today, why you chose my company, why you chose my product. Yeah, it's going to cost you a little bit more up front, but in the end, it's going to cost you less money over the lifetime of the project.
Absolutely.
Now, I know this is one of your favorite things to talk about, especially right now, this time of year when we've got shows and fairs and festivals. So you're getting ready to leave, and you look at the homeowner and you say, well, did you before I leave, did you like our display at the fair? Oh yeah, we signed up with you and 18 other companies. We have 5 more quotes scheduled over the next couple of days. What do we do when we earn somebody's business, TJ, and they have other estimates coming in the next couple of days?
An important standard practice in our industry is to work with a homeowner to help get those appointments canceled by explaining that, hey, something that we do in this industry is, once you sign a contract with a company, that you cancel the appointments you have with the other companies, just to be polite and respectful to them. We don't want their sales reps driving out to the house and spending all their time and their gas and missing other appointments to work with someone, or just to drive to your house to find out you're already under contract. So can we make sure that we cancel those appointments tonight before I head out?
Timid salespeople have skinny children, right? don't be timid right now. Ask them who else is coming out. And it's not just shows and events. Lead aggregators. How many different lead aggregators are, how many different home improvement companies are calling you? You know, I ask on every single sale, do you have anybody else coming out to see you? And do everything you possibly can to get those appointments canceled. You don't want to sit through another one of these appointments. And tell the homeowner, you know what they're going to do, John, right? They're going to come out here and tell you their product's better and that they got a better price. I've never heard of any company that's ever sat down with a homeowner and said, hey, we're number two.
Right.
We got the second best product out in the market. No, everybody's got the best and everybody's got the best price, and get those appointments canceled so that you don't end up with a cancellation.
And the last little nugget on how to avoid cancellations is spending a little bit of personal time with the customer before you leave. We used to call that the cool down.
Right.
And, you know, this is important, right? Because I think so many sales reps that as soon as that paperwork is done, they're like, all right, great, thanks. I'm going to head out. You have a great night. And that can unintentionally give the customer a feeling of like, oh, this guy just kind of took our money and ran. Right. But you sat there and built, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours worth of rapport with these people. If you take time to just speak to them as people, learning about their life or continuing conversations that started earlier in the night, not just packing your things up and leaving the second that ink is on the paper, that can help solidify a couple deals. Because every now and then you're going to get that one person that's like just uncomfortable by how quickly you left as soon as that contract was signed.
That's awesome. Yeah, and we tell salespeople, hey, when you get to the house, when you first arrive, don't talk about yourself because they don't care about you.
Right.
Right. It's not that they're rude people or mean people. It's just they called you to come give them a price on windows, not to talk about where you went to school, not to talk about the weather, not to talk about the Buckeyes, not to talk about how busy you are or where your kids go to school or what your wife or your husband does for a living. We don't talk about ourselves when we get to the house. Well, now they care.
Yeah.
Now they like you. They care about you. They want to know more about you. And like TJ said, take a couple minutes. Open your wallet or your purse or your bag. Show them pictures of your kids. Talk about your dog. Talk about the Buckeyes. You know, have a piece of pie with them before you leave. But like TJ said, spend a little personal time. But make sure you've already done your third-party call. Your welcome call. You've already packed your stuff up. Everything's put away. You're ready to leave. Now take a couple minutes and talk to them so that they're not like, wow, he's not in a hurry or she's not in a hurry to leave. They're spending a couple more minutes with us. And real fast, and then I'll shut up about this because it just made me think about time. I know that there are times that we run short and we're up against the clock and the customer's starting to hurry us up. And they have to get the kids to bed, or they have to get dinner on the table, or maybe they came home for lunch and they got to get back to work, and you're feeling that pressure. Don't shortcut button up to save time because everybody's in a hurry or it's getting late. I'm telling you, I'd rather them be like, man, I wish this guy would wrap up so we can go to bed than to shortcut something and have the customer end up canceling on us.
Yeah, and going back to the conversation about, you know, personal conversations with the homeowner, I always came in with two conversations that I like to have kind of pre-ready in my back pocket because I know that they're easy, lighthearted conversations, but can make for good conversation. The first is I'd always ask someone if they'd ever gone to Disney World before, because that's something that I haven't done since I was about 7, but I've got a 6-year-old child now. And so I'd bring up the conversation of, hey, my wife wants to go to Disney, but I haven't been since I was 6 years old, since I was 7. I don't know what to expect. Is it worth it? Is it a good trip? What should we do? And for people that have gone to Disney, they'll open up and they'll tell you everything about it. And they love talking about those trips. So that's a good one. And then, you know, I'm also a big foodie. So I like to ask people, especially if I'm in a town that's, you know, not 5 minutes away from where I live, I'll say something like, now, look, I love food. Anytime I go to a new town, I like to try kind of the local stuff. If I had to pick one restaurant in town to go to, that's not like a chain, something I can't get, you know, where I live, what's the one place I should stop at before I leave? And let them just gush about their favorite spot. And, that's a really nice light conversation that can build some rapport, and you're asking for their opinion on things, which people really like. But I always had those two in my back pocket ready to go anytime I got in that situation.
Probably also a good thing to talk about politics or
Yeah,
religion.
100%. Yes.
Definitely want to avoid those. Definitely want to avoid those.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So in closing, we've talked about why people cancel. We talked about how to avoid it. Now let's talk about things that we can look for before we go to make sure that the customer's 100% on board, or things that give us clues that maybe they're not. So what's the first one?
The first one is kind of a silly one, but if someone offers to help carry your samples out to your car, I've every single time that's happened, I get real nervous.
Yeah.
And piggybacking into that, really, if they're offering you anything, whether it's carrying your samples to the car, if they're like, hey, we make our own homemade jam, we'd love to give you a 20 pack of them before you leave, or, if they're offering you something when you go, it's kind of a trigger or a sign of guilt in their
Yep.
minds, right? And because I think they already know they're going to cancel, but they want to try to make you happy before you leave so you don't hate them that much.
Yeah, and if you've been in home sales for any amount of time, you're going to be bringing a lot of stuff home. I could write a book about some of the crazy stuff that I've brought home over the years. Deer meat, 8-tracks, believe it or not. If you know what an 8-track is.
6 boxes of Slim Jims.
Slim Jim, yeah, our favorite customer down there, Slim Jims. But, there's a difference between, you sitting at the table and you have a piece of pie with the homeowner, and you tell them how awesome it is. And the wife says, hey, I wrapped you up a piece of pie to take home with you. Thank you. That's very nice of you. But when it's, hey, I gave you the rest of the pie, our family's going to go without, but you can have the whole pie. They're feeling guilty about canceling.
Oh, yeah.
They already know they're going to cancel. They're feeling guilty. And you talked about carrying samples out to the car. I'm telling you, every single time they help you carry your samples out to the car, they're going to cancel.
Yeah,
We had a sales rep that worked for us there, TJ. I won't mention this person's name, but I remember he came into my office one morning and he was so excited. And I said, why are you so excited? He said, last night my customer tried to help me carry my samples out, and I remember what you said. So I said, no, you're not allowed to help me carry them out. And I wouldn't let him. And I said, dude, that's not the point. The point is they wanted to help you. It's not that you stopped them. They're still going to cancel. And sure enough, I think the cancellation showed up before they left for their first lead. So,
yeah,
people, they like you. You've built a relationship with these people. They start to feel guilty. And if they already know they're going to cancel, it's starting to eat at them. And they want to try to be as nice to you as they can. And trust me, they're not calling you to cancel.
Yep, they're going to call your office.
Yeah, they do not want to talk to you. Now, I will warn you, salespeople, if a customer's calling you directly to cancel the order, that's a sign that you didn't do something right in your button up, because you should be the last person they want to talk to if you buttoned up your sale properly.
For sure.
How about deposits, TJ?
Yeah, I think you are at risk if you take very, very small or no deposits, simply because the customer doesn't have any skin in the game. And to me, I think that's, I don't know, it's kind of borderline. I've seen some projects work where there's no deposit, but that can be something. If you're getting a lot of cancellations and you're not taking any deposits, or they're very, very small deposits, maybe that's something that you should look at, because that can be a result.
Or what do they call them? Post-dated deposits.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
That's also an issue, right? Because it says one of two things. Either we're not completely on board yet, or we can't afford the payment.
Yeah.
If you can't afford the down payment, how are you going to afford the monthly payment? Which goes back to, we talked about how to avoid cancellations. We really didn't talk about doing a budget with the homeowner. But another way to avoid cancellations is do a budget with the homeowner before you leave. We want to focus obviously on interest-bearing debt, but in some cases you do need to look at, gasoline and groceries and utilities. But you need to make sure that you sit down with a piece of paper, a pen, and a calculator, and you write out all the bills that they have, how much income they have, and make sure that they are comfortable that they can afford the payment. Because if they're not comfortable they can afford the payment, they're going to cancel. And
I think
again,
that's especially important. I think that's especially important when you're dealing with someone that was showing some angst about the payment, right? Like, especially a lower payment. If the payment's only, $120 and they're feeling uncomfortable, then it's going to be tight. You want to make sure you're doing a budget, right? If it's, $800 or $900 a month, it might be, a less of an urgent need. But if you get any sense of that budget that payment just barely fitting in under the budget, then making sure you take the time to do that to be sure that it's affordable before you leave can save you a ton of deals.
Right. And I think when it comes to affordability, we talk about how that's the first question they ask each other as soon as you walk outside and even the next day, or again, they may say, honey, are you sure we can afford this? You want the homeowner to go, yes. Don't you remember? We sat down with TJ, we went over the budget with TJ, and we both agreed that we could afford this. But you need to take the time to do that budget with the homeowner and make sure they can afford the project.
I think the last topic we have here is leaving things unsettled in the project. And I see this happen far too often where someone will sign their contract and basically they won't mark any colors or any design options. And they'll turn the contract in, they'll tell their manager, oh yeah, they're going to talk over tonight what color they want to go with. And then they're going to call me tomorrow and let me know.
Yeah.
And, maybe one out of every 40 of those goes your way. But far too often, if you leave any decision unsolidified before you leave, that's going to make you very susceptible to a cancellation.
Yeah. And the last thing I've got is when the customer is asking questions about if we decide that we want to cancel this, how do we do that?
Oh, yeah.
Or is it okay to just call you or email you, or do we have to really drop this off or fax it?
That is pure panic. That is red alert.
Yep.
Everything is hitting the fan at this point if they start asking about that.
Yeah, nothing is more frustrating than a sales rep when you tell them, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Wojciechowski canceled their contract. And he goes, yeah, I figured they would. Oh.
They were asking me about it before I left, and I kind of thought that was going to happen.
I figured they might cancel. No, you should have never wrote it up if you thought they were going to cancel.
The subject matter is really next level. This is really advanced technique stuff. But
yeah,
I'm telling you, like, if you are able to implement these things into your button-up process, especially if you're someone that has a lower net rate than you'd like it to be, you can see some really quick and really impactful changes right away.
TJ, I want to first of all thank you for this awesome podcast. I know that when you and I talk every week, we try to come up with ideas that we know that we feel people need to hear, and things that'll help them with their business. And like we said up front, you may already have a system in place to how to do your button up. You may not have any system in place. You may not even need a system. If you don't have cancellations, then don't. It's like the 99-year-old man that goes to the doctor and the doctor says, what's your diet? And he says, I wake up every morning and I eat a pound of bacon and I drink a beer. And then for lunch, I have another pound of bacon and I drink another beer. And for dinner, I usually just eat some ice cream. And the doctor says, you cannot eat that way. You're going to kill yourself. So he changes his diet and starts eating salads and salmon and fish. And he's dead like 2 months later.
Right.
Point is, if whatever you're doing is working, leave it. You're good. Don't change it.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, if you don't have something in place and you're getting cancellations, you need to take the time to learn how to button up a sale properly. Because again, it all boils down to 3 days later, I'm going to knock on that door and put my hand out and say, I'm here to pick up my money, my commission. I earned it. And if you do your job right at the end before you go home, your money will still be there waiting on you.
Absolutely. And a quick reminder before we go that our first webinar is coming in the next quarter, is right around the corner.
Yep.
We are finalizing the details on the topics and how we want to proceed with that. But if you would like to be a part of that, we would love to have you. And to celebrate our first webinar, we are giving away a free spot in the webinar.
Yes.
So to anyone who would like to join that giveaway, it's very simple. All you have to do is email us at phil@tonyhoodie.com, which you'll see on the screen here. Just tell us your name, your company, and what products you sell, and let us know you'd like to enter the giveaway. And basically, as we get closer to the day of the event, we are going to draw a name out of the hat, and one person's going to win free admittance for their entire organization. So if you got a sales team of 30 people and you want all 30 to join, have at it. You absolutely can. That's on us. So if you'd like to enter that giveaway, again, phil@tonyhoodie.com.
Yes. And we got a lot of people this past week enter and say, hey, I'd like to win that. And we got an enormous response with this week. We talked last week about the consumer price guide, and we actually gave 7 of them away. And the response was incredible. I cannot tell you how many people purchased these last week. And if you take the time to go through it, it's got, I'm looking at the window one right now, and it talks about why you should replace your windows, when to replace your windows, what to look for when talking to a window company. It's got mystery shopping. So it's got at least 10 to 12 quotes for the top window companies in the market to show what to expect to pay when you purchase windows with these companies. And it's got all the different qualities of product. This is a fantastic guide to use for price conditioning. And it's a great tool to pull out when you're doing your product presentation. And because the response, TJ, was so big, Tony gave me permission to give a huge discount to people that watch our podcast and send an email to phil@tonyhoodie.com and request pricing for the window price guides, the bathroom price guide, or the entry door price guide, or the roofing price guide. So if you sell roofing, doors, bathroom remodeling, or windows, send me an email. Tell me how many of these you need and what product, and I'll send you a price, and you can get these. But I promise you, you use it once, and it's already paid for itself. Fantastic tool.
Perfect. Well, yeah, those price guides are an incredible value. We think you'll really find a lot of great uses for those. But we want to thank you again for all the wonderful feedback, for joining us here. We want to thank our sponsors, Engage, Builder Prime, and Hiring Strategies. And we look forward to talking to you again next week.
Yeah, and the last thing I've got for you is if you're on LinkedIn, find TJ Parsons and Phil Wiley on LinkedIn and connect with us. We put a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. The podcast link is on there. We also have a weekly blog, and we like to forward things from the industry that we find out is really cool to our followers. So find us on LinkedIn. Let's connect. And we appreciate your support. We appreciate you watching this podcast. And like I always like to end, go sell something, right?
Go sell something.
Amen.
And if you or your business is in need of training, recruiting, process development, or consulting, you can contact us here at Tony Hoodie Training and Consulting.
by visiting TonyHody.com. Click the Contact tab and enter your information for a free consultation to see how we can help you grow your business. Tony Hody Training Consulting, teaching ordinary people how to do extraordinary things.